The gunshot that killed Jacob Hartley's wife echoed through his mind every single day, a phantom sound that no amount of whiskey or hard work could silence. And on this particular scorching afternoon in July of 1877, as he hammered another loose board on his dilapidated barn, he swore for the 1,000th time that his heart had been buried alongside Sarah 3 years ago in the dusty Texas soil. The Broken Creek Ranch sprawled across 200 acres of stubborn land just outside of San Antonio, its fences sagging like the spirits of those who lived there, its main house in desperate need of paint and repair. Jacob had let everything fall to ruin after Sarah's death. The Comanche raid that took her life had stolen something fundamental from him, something he believed could never be recovered. He was 32 years old and felt ancient, his blue eyes hard as flint, his jaw perpetually set in a grim line. His hired hand, Miguel Reyes, a weathered Mexican vaquero in his 50s, had stayed on despite the ranch's decline, more out of loyalty than any real hope of prosperity. "Patron, you cannot keep living like this," Miguel said that afternoon, watching Jacob work with single-minded intensity under the brutal sun. "The ranch, it dies a little more each day. You die a little more each day." Jacob drove another nail home with unnecessary force. "Then let it die." "I am not looking for salvation, Miguel. I am just trying to get through each day without thinking too much." Miguel shook his head, his weathered face creased with concern, but he said nothing more. There was no point arguing with a man who had built walls around his heart, thicker than the stone foundations of the old Spanish missions. That evening, as the sun painted the Texas sky in shades of orange and crimson, Jacob sat on his porch with a bottle of whiskey, staring out at the land he no longer cared about. The house behind him was a mess, dishes piled in the kitchen, dust coating every surface. He had loved this place once, had dreamed of filling it with children and laughter. Now it was just a shell, as empty as he felt inside. He did not know that his life was about to change. He did not know that fate, that capricious force he no longer believed in, was already in motion, sending someone who would tear down every wall he had built. The stagecoach rattled into San Antonio 2 days later, carrying among its passengers a young woman with hair the color of autumn flames and green eyes that held both determination and desperation in equal measure. Molly Catherine O'Brien was 24 years old, and she had traveled all the way from Boston with everything she owned packed into 2 worn carpetbags and a trunk that had seen better days. She stepped down from the coach onto the dusty street, her traveling dress rumpled and stained from the long journey, and looked around at the rough frontier town with a mixture of hope and trepidation. San Antonio was nothing like Boston. The buildings were low and sprawling, made of adobe and wood rather than brick and stone. The people were different too, harder-edged, weathered by the sun and the constant struggle of life on the frontier. Cowboys lounged outside saloons, their spurs jingling as they walked. Mexican vendors sold food from carts, calling out in Spanish. The air smelled of dust, horses, and opportunity. Molly had come west for a specific reason. Her brother, Daniel O'Brien, had written to her 6 months earlier, telling her he had established himself as a surveyor in Texas, and that there were opportunities here for someone willing to work hard. Then the letters had stopped. 3 months of silence had driven Molly to make the journey herself, determined to find out what had happened to her only living family. She had been to the surveyor's office, to the land office, to every place she could think of. Finally, a clerk had told her that Daniel had last been seen heading out to survey some disputed land near a place called Broken Creek Ranch. That had been 2 months ago. No one had seen him since. Broken Creek Ranch. Molly asked the clerk, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Can you tell me how to get there?" "Ma'am, I would not recommend going out there. The owner, Jacob Hartley, he is not exactly welcoming to strangers. Place is falling apart anyway." "If your brother went there, well, The clerk trailed off, unwilling to voice the obvious concern, Molly's jaw set with determination. I need to find my brother. Can you give me directions or not? The clerk sighed and drew her a rough map. It is about an hour's ride north. But ma'am, you really should not go alone. This is not Boston. The frontier can be dangerous. I did not come all this way to turn back now, Molly said firmly. She took the map, thanked the clerk, and went to find someone who could rent her a horse and wagon. By the time she reached Broken Creek Ranch, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. The place looked even worse than she had imagined from the clerk's description. The main gate hung at an angle, one hinge completely broken. Fences were down in multiple places. The barn looked like a strong wind might knock it over. The house itself, a two-story structure that had probably been quite handsome once, was now sadly neglected, its paint peeling, several shutters hanging loose. Molly climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from the ride, and approached the house. She could see a man on the porch, sitting in a chair tilted back against the wall. Even from a distance, she could tell he was watching her with suspicion. Jacob had spotted the wagon as soon as it turned onto his property. Visitors were rare and usually meant trouble. He set down his whiskey bottle and stood, his hand instinctively moving to check that his Colt revolver was within easy reach. As the wagon drew closer, he was surprised to see the driver was a woman, and even more surprised by the shock of red hair visible beneath her bonnet. Molly stopped a respectful distance from the porch and looked up at the man standing there. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His eyes were the coldest blue she had ever seen, and they regarded her with absolute zero warmth. "Mr. Hartley," she called out, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "My name is Molly O'Brien. I am looking for my brother Daniel O'Brien. I was told he might have come here." Jacob's expression did not change. "Do not know anyone by that name. You should leave." "Please," Molly said, taking a step closer. "He is a surveyor. He was supposed to come here to map some disputed land. That was 2 months ago, and I have not heard from him since. If you know anything at all, I need to know." "I said I do not know him," Jacob repeated, his voice hard. "Now get off my property." Molly felt frustration rise in her chest. She had come too far to be turned away so easily. "Mr. Hartley, I understand you value your privacy, but this is my brother we are talking about, my only family. If he came here, if something happened to him, I have a right to know." "You have no rights on my land," Jacob said flatly. He started to turn away, dismissing her. Something inside Molly snapped. "Fine," she said sharply. "Be a miserable, unhelpful excuse for a man. I will find out what happened to Daniel on my own. I just hope you can live with yourself if something terrible has happened and you could have helped prevent it." Jacob froze. He turned back slowly, his eyes narrowing. "What did you say to me?" Molly lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "You heard me. I came here asking for help finding my brother, and you cannot even spare 5 minutes of basic human decency. Whatever has made you so bitter and mean-spirited, I am sorry for it, but that does not give you the right to treat people like they do not matter." For a long moment, Jacob just stared at her. No one had spoken to him like that in years. Most people in town either pitied him or avoided him. This red-headed stranger with flashing green eyes had just called him out without a trace of fear. Despite himself, he felt something stir inside him, some long-dormant ember of feeling. "Miguel," he called out, not taking his eyes off Molly. The vaquero emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. "See, patron, did a surveyor come through here a couple months back?" Miguel thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "See, I remember. A young man spoke with an accent like hers. He was mapping the creek boundary. I gave him water, pointed him toward the disputed section by the old Henderson property." Molly's heart leaped. "You saw him. Was he all right?" Miguel glanced at Jacob, then back to Molly. "He seemed fine, señorita. He said he would need a few days to complete his work. He was heading north toward the disputed territory." "The Henderson property has been abandoned for years," Jacob said grudgingly. "It is rough country." Easy to get lost or run into trouble. Then I need to go there, Molly said immediately. Can you give me directions? No, Jacob said flatly. You would never make it. The territory is disputed between 3 different ranches and none of them take kindly to trespassers. Plus there are still occasional Comanche raids, rattlesnakes, rough terrain. A woman alone would not last a day. Then I will hire a guide, Molly said stubbornly. No one in town will take you. Too dangerous. Molly felt tears of frustration prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Then what am I supposed to do? Just give up. Accept that my brother might be dead or dying somewhere and I did nothing to help him. Jacob felt the wall around his heart crack just a little. He recognized that desperation in her voice, that refusal to accept loss. He had felt the same way after Sarah died, before the reality had finally crushed the hope out of him. You can stay in the barn tonight, he heard himself say, almost against his will. In the morning, Miguel and I will take you to the disputed territory. We will look for signs of your brother. But after that, win or lose, you go back to Boston or wherever you came from. Understood? Molly's face transformed with relief and gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. Thank you so much. I promise I will not be any trouble. Jacob grunted noncommittally and disappeared into the house, already regretting his decision. Miguel showed Molly to the barn, clearing out a small tack room and bringing her a blanket and pillow. Patron Jacob, he is not usually so helpful, Miguel said with a slight smile. You must have made an impression. He certainly made one on me, Molly said dryly. Though not the kind I would prefer, Miguel's smile widened. He has been through much pain, señorita. Before his wife died, he was a different man, kind, full of life. Now he is just surviving, not living. Molly felt a pang of sympathy despite Jacob's rudeness. His wife died. How? Comanche raid 3 years ago. He was in town buying supplies. When he came back, she was gone. They never even recovered her body for proper burial. Miguel's face was somber. It broke something in him. He swore he would never care about anything again, would never let anyone close enough to hurt him. That is a terrible way to live, Molly said softly. See, Miguel agreed, but some pain it cuts too deep. Some men, they never heal. After Miguel left, Molly settled into the small space, her mind whirling. She was worried sick about Daniel, but she also could not stop thinking about Jacob Hartley and the pain Miguel had described. She understood loss. Their parents had died in a factory fire when she and Daniel were young. They had raised each other, in a sense, relying only on one another. The thought of losing Daniel was unbearable, which is why she had to find him, no matter what it took. The next morning dawned clear and hot. Molly woke early, washed as best she could with the water from the pump, and presented herself at the main house. Jacob and Miguel were already preparing horses and supplies for the journey. In the daylight, Molly could see Jacob more clearly. Despite his rough appearance and hard demeanor, he was handsome in a rugged way. His hands were strong and capable as he checked the saddles and gear. He moved with the easy confidence of a man completely at home in this harsh environment. Can you ride? Jacob asked without preamble when he saw her. Yes, Molly said. My brother and I used to ride in the parks back home. Jacob snorted. This is not a park, lady. The terrain is rough and we will be moving fast. If you cannot keep up, we turn back. Clear. Perfectly, Molly said, matching his tone. Jacob gave her a praising look, then gestured to a sorrel mare. That is Rosie. She is steady and reliable. Stay between Miguel and me and do exactly what we tell you. This is not a pleasure ride. They set out an hour later, heading north across the rolling Texas landscape. The morning was already hot, and Molly was grateful for the bonnet that shaded her face. She had changed into her most practical dress, but she was still acutely aware that her clothing was not designed for this kind of travel. For the first hour, no one spoke. Jacob rode ahead, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain. Miguel brought up the rear, occasionally offering Molly a reassuring smile. The landscape was beautiful in its own harsh way, all scrubby brush and rocky outcroppings, with the occasional live oak providing sparse shade. How much further? Molly finally asked. Another 2 hours to the disputed boundary, Jacob said without turning around. Then we start searching. If your brother was surveying, he would have left markers, maybe a camp. We look for those. And if we do not find anything? Molly asked, voicing her deepest fear. Then we keep looking, Miguel said gently from behind her. Do not lose hope yet, señorita. They rode on, the sun climbing higher, the heat becoming oppressive. Molly drank sparingly from her canteen, mindful of Miguel's advice to conserve water. Her legs ached from the unfamiliar saddle, and her dress was sticking to her back with sweat, but she refused to complain. Jacob Hartley clearly expected her to falter, and she was determined to prove him wrong. Around noon, they reached the disputed territory. It was easy to see why multiple ranches claimed it. There was a creek running through it, precious water in this dry country and good grazing land on either side. But it was also isolated, surrounded by rough country that made it difficult to access. Jacob dismounted and studied the ground. Miguel, you take the east side of the creek, I will take the west. Miss O'Brien, you stay with Miguel. I can help search, Molly protested. You can help by not getting lost or hurt, Jacob said bluntly. This is not a debate. They split up, moving slowly along the creek, looking for any signs of human activity. Molly found herself growing increasingly anxious. What if they found nothing? What if Daniel had been here and moved on? Or worse, what if they found evidence of tragedy? It was Miguel who spotted it first, a piece of cloth tied to a branch, the kind of marker a surveyor might use. Patron, over here. Jacob and Molly quickly joined him. Sure enough, there were several markers nearby and signs that someone had camped in the area. Jacob knelt, examining the ground with experienced eyes. This is at least 6 weeks old, maybe more, he said. But someone was definitely here. See these tracks, boots, walking around taking measurements. And here, this is where he had a small fire. Which direction did he go? Molly asked, her voice tight with hope and fear. Jacob stood, looking around carefully. Hard to say. The tracks are too old, too weathered. But if he was following the creek to map it, he would have gone. He trailed off, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. What is it? Molly asked. Smoke, Jacob said quietly. About 2 miles north, could be nothing, could be something. They mounted up quickly and rode toward the smoke. As they drew closer, Molly could see it was coming from a small canyon. Jacob held up his hand, signaling them to stop. Could be hostile, he said quietly. Miguel, stay with Miss O'Brien, I will scout ahead. Patron, that is not wise, Miguel protested. We should go together and leave her alone. Jacob shook his head. No, I will be careful. If I am not back in 20 minutes, take her and ride back to the ranch. Before Molly could protest, Jacob had dismounted and was moving quietly toward the canyon on foot. She watched him disappear into the scrub brush, her heart pounding. Despite his harsh exterior, he was risking himself to help her find Daniel. The 20 minutes felt like an eternity. Molly found herself praying, something she had not done in years, pleading with God or fate or whoever might be listening to keep both Jacob and her brother safe. Then Jacob reappeared and there was someone with him. A thin, bearded man walking unsteadily, leaning heavily on Jacob for support. Daniel, Molly screamed, leaping from her horse and running toward them. Her brother looked up, his face gaunt and sunburned and his eyes widened in disbelief. Molly, is that really you? She reached him and threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. You are alive. Oh, thank God you are alive, Daniel hugged her back weakly. I cannot believe you came all this way. How did you find me, mister? Hartley helped me, Molly said, turning to look at Jacob with such gratitude that he had to look away. What happened to you? I fell, Daniel said, grimacing in pain. I was mapping the canyon and the edge gave way, broke my leg in the fall. I have been stuck here for weeks, trying to heal enough to ride out. I ran out of most of my supplies days ago if you had not come. He did not finish the sentence. Miguel had brought the horses forward, and between them they managed to get Daniel mounted. His left leg was splinted with makeshift materials, and he was clearly in considerable pain, but he was alive. We need to get him back to the ranch, Jacob said. He needs food, water, and someone to look at that leg properly. Miguel, you ride ahead and prepare the house. Miss O'Brien and I will bring him. The journey back was slow and careful. Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness, weakened by his ordeal. Molly rode close beside him, keeping up a steady stream of reassuring talk. Jacob led them by the most direct route, stopping frequently to let Daniel rest. By the time they reached Broken Creek Ranch, the sun was setting. Miguel had prepared the downstairs guest room, a space that had not been used since Sarah died. Jacob helped carry Daniel inside and settled him on the bed with surprising gentleness. Miguel will ride to town for the doctor, Jacob said. In the meantime, we need to get food and water into him slowly. Too much too fast will make him sick. Molly nodded, already moving to Daniel's side. I know, thank you, Mr. Hartley. I cannot tell you what this means to me. You saved his life. Jacob shrugged uncomfortably. You should thank Miguel. He spotted the markers. I thank you both, Molly said firmly, her green eyes meeting his blue ones. You did not have to help me, but you did. I will not forget that. Jacob turned away, unsettled by the warmth in her gaze, by the gratitude that made him feel things he had sworn not to feel anymore. I will go help Miguel prepare for the ride to town, he muttered, and fled the room. Over the next few days, Broken Creek Ranch became a different place. The doctor came and confirmed that Daniel's leg was broken but healing reasonably well, though he would need several weeks of rest before attempting any kind of travel. Molly took over nursing her brother, but in her spare time, she began quietly working on the house. Jacob came in one evening to find the kitchen cleaned, dishes washed and put away, the floor swept. The next day, the downstairs parlor had been dusted and aired out. Curtains that had hung limp and gray were taken down, washed and rehung. You do not have to do this, Jacob said gruffly when he found Molly scrubbing the porch steps. I know, Molly said cheerfully, but I need to keep busy, and this house deserves better than what it has been getting. Besides, it is the least I can do to repay your hospitality. I am not looking for repayment, Jacob said, uncomfortable with the idea of owing or being owed. Molly sat back on her heels and looked up at him. Mr. Hartley, you saved my brother's life. You opened your home to us, strangers, without asking for anything in return. Maybe you are not looking for repayment, but I am looking to give it. So please let me help. Your home needs it, and frankly, so do you. You do not know anything about what I need, Jacob said, his voice harder now. I know you have been living like a ghost in this house, Molly said gently but firmly. I know you stopped caring about things after your wife died, but Mr. Hartley, she would not want you to live like this. No one who loved you would want this for you. Jacob's face went white, then red. You have no right to talk about my wife. You did not know her. You do not know anything about me or what I have been through. You are right, Molly said, standing up and meeting his angry gaze without flinching. I did not know her, but I know grief. I know loss. My parents died when I was 12 years old, burned alive in a factory fire. Daniel and I watched the building burn, knowing they were inside and we could not save them. So do not tell me I do not understand pain. Jacob stood frozen, his anger deflating in the face of her quiet strength. I am sorry, he said finally. That must have been terrible. It was, Molly said simply. But Daniel and I survived it. We learned to live again even with the pain. Because that is what living people do, Mr. Hartley. We keep going. We find reasons to care even when it seems impossible. She picked up her bucket and brush and went back to scrubbing, leaving Jacob standing there, his world tilted on its axis. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than numbness or pain. He felt challenged, pushed, forced to question the walls he had built. And he was not sure whether to be angry or grateful. Over the following weeks, as Daniel slowly healed, Jacob found himself drawn into conversations and activities he had avoided for years. Molly had a way of including him without making it seem forced. She would ask his opinion on repairs to the house, then actually listen to his answers. She would cook meals and set his place at the table as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She would talk about her life in Boston, about Daniel's work, about her hopes and dreams, filling the house with words and life it had not known in so long. Daniel, as he grew stronger, proved to be good company as well. He was intelligent and well-read, with a surveyor's eye for the land and a natural curiosity about everything. He and Jacob spent hours discussing ranching, the disputes over land rights, the changing face of Texas as it recovered from the Civil War and Reconstruction. "You have good land here," Daniel said one afternoon as he sat on the porch, his leg propped up. "With some work, this could be one of the best ranches in the area." "It used to be," Jacob admitted. Before I have let it go to hell." "It is not too late to bring it back," Daniel said. "You have water, good grazing, solid buildings that just need repair. What you need is help and motivation. I have Miguel." "You need more than Miguel," Daniel said frankly. "You need a reason to care again, Jacob. This ranch, it is dying because you are letting it die, but it does not have to be that way." Jacob was quiet for a long time. "I stopped caring because caring hurt too much. When Sarah died, it felt like someone ripped my heart out. I swore I would never let myself be that vulnerable again." "So instead you are dying by inches," Daniel said. "That is not living, my friend. That is just a slower form of death." Before Jacob could respond, Molly came out with a pitcher of lemonade. She had found lemons in town and insisted on making it, declaring that everyone needed something cool and refreshing in the Texas heat. As she poured glasses for both men, Jacob found himself watching her, really watching her. She was beautiful, he realized, though not in the delicate way Sarah had been. Molly was all fire and determination, her red hair constantly escaping its pins, her green eyes bright with intelligence and life. She moved with purpose as if every action mattered. And she had brought something back to his house, to his life, that he had thought was gone forever. Hope. The realization terrified him. That night, Jacob lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He could hear Molly moving around downstairs, checking on Daniel one last time before retiring to the room she had claimed. The house felt different now. It felt alive again. He thought about Sarah, about the life they had planned together. She had been his first and only love, gentle and sweet, full of dreams for their future. Losing her had destroyed him because he had not known it was possible to hurt that much and survive. But now, there was Molly. She had not asked to come into his life, had not tried to replace Sarah or make him forget. She had simply been herself, strong and determined and kind, forcing him to engage with the world again whether he wanted to or not. He could not love her, he told himself firmly. He would not. It was too dangerous, too painful. Better to remain numb and safe than to risk that kind of devastation again. But even as he made that vow, he knew he was fighting a losing battle. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. With Molly's encouragement and Daniel's advice, Jacob began to truly work on the ranch again. He and Miguel repaired fences, fixed the barn roof, brought in the scattered cattle. Daniel, still recovering but growing stronger, helped with planning and organization. Molly took over the house completely, transforming it from a neglected shell into something resembling a real home again. It was hard work, harder than anything Jacob had done in years. But it was also good. He fell into bed each night exhausted but satisfied, a feeling he had forgotten was possible. He also found himself noticing Molly more and more. The way she laughed at something Daniel said, throwing her head back with unself-conscious joy. The way she hummed while she worked, old Irish songs her mother had taught her. The way her eyes softened when she looked at her brother, full of love and relief that he was safe. One evening, he came in from work to find her struggling with a stuck window in the parlor. She was standing on a chair, pushing at the frame with all her strength, her face flushed with effort. "Let me help," Jacob said, crossing the room. Molly looked down at him, startled. "Oh, I did not hear you come in. This window has not been opened in years, I think. The frame is warped." "Get down before you fall and break your neck," Jacob said, reaching up to steady her as she climbed off the chair. His hands closed around her waist, and for a moment they were very close, her hands braced on his shoulders for balance. Jacob found himself looking up into her green eyes, seeing them widen slightly as she looked back at him. He could feel the warmth of her body through the thin fabric of her dress, could smell the faint scent of soap and sunshine that clung to her. "Thank you," Molly said softly, making no immediate move to step away. "You are welcome," Jacob heard himself say, his voice rough. They stood like that for a heartbeat longer, then Molly stepped back quickly, smoothing her skirts. "The window," she said a little breathlessly. "Can you fix it?" Jacob examined the window, grateful for something to focus on besides the way his heart was pounding. "It is swollen from moisture. I can plane down the frame, should open fine after that." "That would be wonderful," Molly said. "I would love to get some cross breeze through this room in the evenings. It gets so hot." Jacob nodded and went to get his tools, his mind spinning. That moment of closeness had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. He had felt something, a pull toward her that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Over dinner that night, Daniel made an announcement. "I have been thinking. My leg is nearly healed and I need to finish the surveying work I started. But I do not want to leave Molly alone at an inn in town while I am out in the field." "I can take care of myself, Daniel," Molly said firmly. "I know you can," Daniel said, "but I would still worry." "So I was hoping, Jacob, that you might allow Molly to stay here for a few more weeks while I complete my work. I know it is an imposition, but—" "Yes," Jacob said before he could stop himself. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him in surprise. "I mean, it is not an imposition. She has been a help around here, and Miguel can chaperone, keep things proper." "That is very generous of you," Daniel said, smiling. "Molly, if Mr. Hartley is sure it is not too much trouble," Molly said carefully, her eyes on Jacob. "It is settled then," Jacob said, focusing on his plate to avoid her gaze. Later, after Daniel had retired and Miguel had gone to his small house near the barn, Jacob found Molly sitting on the porch looking up at the stars. Without thinking too much about it, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey and took one out to her. "I do not usually drink spirits," Molly said, but she accepted the glass. "Tonight might be a good night to start," Jacob said, settling into the chair beside her. "It has been quite a few weeks." Molly took a small sip and coughed. "That is strong." "It is meant to be," Jacob said, a hint of amusement in his voice. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Finally, Molly spoke. "Thank you for letting me stay. I know this is your private space, and having strangers here has probably been difficult." "You are not really strangers anymore," Jacob said quietly. "And you have done more for this place in a few weeks than I managed in 3 years. I should be thanking you." "You gave me back my brother," Molly said, her voice thick with emotion. "That is everything, Jacob, everything." It was the first time she had used his given name, and the sound of it on her lips did something to him. "I am glad we found him in time," he said. "So am I." Molly took another small sip of whiskey. "Miguel told me about your wife, about what happened to her. I am so sorry." Jacob tensed. "Miguel talks too much." "He cares about you," Molly said gently. "He worries that you have given up on life." "Maybe I have," Jacob said harshly. "Maybe I do not want to care about things anymore because caring leads to pain." "It also leads to joy," Molly countered. "To love, to connection, to all the things that make life worth living. Yes, there is risk. Yes, you can get hurt. But the alternative is what you have been doing, which is not really living at all." "You do not understand," Jacob said, standing abruptly. "When you love someone that much, when they are ripped away from you in violence and blood, it breaks something inside. You do not just recover from that." "I know you do not just recover," Molly said, standing as well. "But you can heal. Slowly, painfully, but you can heal. My parents died horribly, Jacob. I had nightmares for years, but I learned to live with the grief, to carry it without letting it destroy me. You can too." "I do not want to," Jacob said, the words torn from somewhere deep inside. "I do not want to heal because healing means letting her go, and she is all I have left." "No," Molly said firmly, stepping closer to him. "Healing does not mean letting her go. It means making room for her memory alongside new experiences, new connections. She will always be part of you, but she does not have to be all of you. Jacob looked down at her, this woman who had come into his life like a red-headed storm, turning everything upside down. "Why do you care?" he asked hoarsely. "Why does it matter to you what happens to me?" Molly met his gaze steadily. "Because I see a good man who has been drowning for 3 years, and I think he deserves to breathe again. Because your kindness saved my brother's life, and I believe that kindness is still in you, buried but not dead. And because—" she hesitated, then forged ahead. "Because I have come to care about you despite your best efforts to push everyone away." The confession hung in the air between them. Jacob felt his heart hammering in his chest, felt all his carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "Molly," he said, her name a plea and a warning at once. "I am not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I know you are not ready for anything. I just wanted you to know that someone sees you, really sees you, and thinks you are worth caring about." Before Jacob could respond, before he could even process what she had said, Molly turned and hurried into the house, leaving him alone on the porch with his whiskey and his chaotic thoughts. That night, Jacob barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Molly's face, heard her words. Someone sees you, really sees you, and thinks you are worth caring about. When had he become so invisible, even to himself? When had he decided that the man he used to be was not worth fighting for? By morning, he had made a decision. He could not love again, not yet, maybe not ever, but he could try. He could try to be more than the ghost he had become. For Molly, who had risked so much to find her brother. For Daniel, who had become a genuine friend. For Miguel, who had stayed loyal through the worst of times. And maybe, just maybe, for himself. Daniel left 2 days later to finish his surveying work, promising to return within 3 weeks. Molly stood on the porch waving goodbye, trying not to show how nervous she was about being left at the ranch. Not because she did not trust Jacob, but because she trusted her own growing feelings too much. She had not meant to fall for him. When she first arrived, she had thought him rude and bitter. But over the weeks, she had seen glimpses of the man beneath the grief. His unexpected gentleness with her injured brother. His dry humor that emerged occasionally in conversation. The way his whole face changed when he smiled, which was happening more and more often. The quiet competence with which he did everything, whether fixing a fence or tending to the animals. She had come to admire him, then to like him, and finally to care for him in a way that went far deeper than simple friendship. But she knew he was not ready for her feelings. He was still healing, still learning to live again. The last thing he needed was pressure or expectations. So she resolved to be his friend, to help him rebuild his life and his ranch, and to guard her heart as carefully as she could. It was a resolution that lasted exactly 4 days. They were working together in the garden, a plot behind the house that had been completely overgrown. Molly had decided it needed to be reclaimed, and Jacob had agreed to help her clear it out. They worked side by side in the morning sun, pulling weeds and hauling away dead plants. "What will you plant?" Jacob asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Vegetables mostly," Molly said. "Tomatoes, beans, squash, maybe some herbs for cooking, and I would like to have flowers too, just because they are beautiful." Sarah loved flowers, Jacob said quietly. It was the first time he had voluntarily mentioned his wife. She had roses all along the front of the house. Red ones. "We could plant roses again," Molly suggested gently. "As a memorial to her." Jacob was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "I would like that, she would like that." They continued working, and Molly felt a swell of emotion at this small breakthrough. He was remembering Sarah not just with pain, but with love, with a desire to honor her memory. It was progress. "Tell me about her," Molly said impulsively. "If you want to, I mean, what was she like?" Jacob straightened, leaning on his shovel, his eyes distant. "She was gentle, kind to everyone. She saw the good in people, even when they did not deserve it. She loved this place, believed in what we were building together. She wanted children, lots of them." His voice cracked slightly. "We were going to fill this house with family." "She sounds wonderful," Molly said softly. She was, Jacob agreed. She did not deserve what happened to her. She was innocent. She never hurt anyone. And those raiders— He stopped, his jaw clenching with old rage and grief. Molly set down her trowel and moved closer to him. It was not your fault, Jacob, you know that, right? You could not have known, could not have prevented it. I should have been here, Jacob said, the words full of anguish. I should have protected her. And you might have died too, Molly said firmly. Then where would Miguel be? Where would Daniel be? You could not have saved her, Jacob, but you saved my brother. You have to count for something. Jacob looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his eyes. When did you become so wise? He asked, a hint of his old humor breaking through. I have always been wise, Molly said, trying to lighten the mood. You were just too stubborn to notice. To her surprise and delight, Jacob laughed. It was a rusty sound, as if he was out of practice, but it was genuine. I cannot argue with that, he said. They went back to work, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a new ease between them, a deeper understanding. When Jacob's hand accidentally brushed Molly's as they both reached for the same weed, neither of them pulled away immediately. When their eyes met over the cleared garden bed, there was something new there, fragile but undeniable. That evening, Miguel commented on the change. Patron, you seem different, lighter somehow. Do I? Jacob asked, though he knew it was true. Something had loosened in his chest, a weight he had carried for so long he had forgotten it was there. See, it is good to see. Miss Molly, she is good for you. She is not we are not. Jacob trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence. Miguel smiled knowingly. Not yet, perhaps. But the way you look at her, the way she looks at you, it is only a matter of time, patron. I cannot, Jacob said, but it sounded weak even to his own ears. I am not ready, I may never be ready. Love does not wait for you to be ready, Miguel said wisely. It comes when it comes. The question is whether you are brave enough to accept it. Over the next week, Jacob found himself seeking out Molly's company more and more. They worked together on various projects around the ranch, talking about everything and nothing. She told him stories about growing up in Boston, about the strange ways of city folk, about her dreams of adventure and independence. He found himself talking about his childhood in Kentucky, about how he came to Texas, about the early days of building the ranch when everything seemed possible. They were careful not to be alone too much, always working where Miguel could see them, maintaining propriety. But the connection between them grew stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, a sudden summer storm blew in, one of those violent Texas thunderstorms that turns the sky black and unleashes torrents of rain. Jacob and Molly were caught out by the barn, and they ran for the main house, arriving breathless and soaked to the skin. Molly started laughing, looking down at her dripping dress. I look like a drowned cat. Jacob looked at her, at the way her wet hair clung to her face and neck, at the way her eyes sparkled with laughter, and felt something break open inside him. She was so alive, so full of joy despite everything she had been through. She had lost her parents, nearly lost her brother, and yet here she was, laughing in the rain. You look beautiful, he said, the words out before he could stop them. Molly's laughter faded and she looked at him with wide eyes. Jacob, he stepped closer to her, drawn by a force he could no longer resist. I know I said I would never feel this way again. I know I have been fighting it, but Molly, I cannot stop thinking about you. You have brought life back to this place, back to me, and I do not know what to do about it. Molly's breath caught. What do you want to do about it? Jacob reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his hand. I want to try. I want to take the risk, even though it terrifies me, because you are right. What I have been doing is not living, and I am tired of being afraid. I am afraid too, Molly whispered. I am afraid you will realize you are not ready, that I am just a distraction, that you will send me away. I will not send you away, Jacob said firmly. I promise you that. This is real, Molly. What I feel for you is real. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to refuse, and brushed his lips against hers. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. Molly answered by rising on her toes and kissing him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. The kiss deepened, becoming less tentative, more certain. Jacob wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, feeling her warmth through their wet clothes. It felt like coming home, like waking from a long sleep, like life rushing back into him all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Molly rested her forehead against his chest. "Tell me this is not a mistake," she said. "It is not a mistake," Jacob said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are not a mistake. This is the first thing that has felt right in 3 years." They stood holding each other as the rain pounded on the roof and thunder rolled across the sky. Two people who had found each other against all odds, learning to hope and to love again. When Miguel came in from securing the barn, he found them sitting decorously on opposite sides of the kitchen table, ostensibly drying off. But the way they kept stealing glances at each other told him everything he needed to know. He smiled to himself and said nothing, just headed to his own quarters, satisfied that his patron was finally beginning to heal. The next 2 weeks were the happiest Jacob could remember since Sarah's death. He and Molly fell into an easy rhythm, working together during the day, stealing moments of privacy when they could. They were careful to maintain propriety. Miguel served as a constant chaperone, but the connection between them was obvious to anyone who looked. Jacob found himself smiling more, laughing more, planning for the future again. He and Molly talked about what could be done with the ranch, how it could be restored to its former glory and beyond. She had good ideas, practical suggestions that showed she understood the land and the work involved. "You could expand the herd," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "There is good grazing land you are not using, and with Daniel's surveys establishing clear property lines, you would not have to worry about disputes with neighboring ranches." "That takes capital," Jacob said. "Money I do not have after 3 years of letting everything slide. Then we find investors or we take out a loan. Jacob, this land is valuable. Any bank would lend against it." She paused, then added more softly, "If you want to rebuild, I mean. If that is what you want for your future." Jacob took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I do want to rebuild. For the first time in years, I want a plan to build to create something lasting. And Molly, I want you to be part of that future, if you want to be." Molly turned to him, her green eyes shining. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I know this has all happened fast. I am saying that a month ago I was convinced I would never love again. But you changed everything, Molly. You brought light back into my darkness. You made me want to live again. And I know it is soon, I know we should probably wait, but I do not want to wait. I have wasted 3 years. I do not want to waste another day." "Jacob Hartley, are you asking me to marry you?" Molly asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Yes," Jacob said simply. "I am asking you to take a chance on a broken-down rancher with a troubled past and a ranch that needs a lot of work. I am asking you to build a life with me here in Texas, far from everything you know. I am asking you to love me, even though I am still learning how to love again." Tears spilled down Molly's cheeks. "You are not broken, Jacob. You are healing, and I want to be part of that healing. I want to build a life with you. I want to fill this house with love and laughter and maybe, eventually, with children. I want to plant that garden and those roses and watch them grow. I want all of it with you." "Is that a yes?" Jacob asked, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "Yes," Molly said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Jacob pulled her into his arms and kissed her, pouring all his gratitude and hope and love into that kiss. They were so lost in each other that they did not hear Miguel approach until he cleared his throat loudly. "Patron," he said, grinning widely. "I assume this means we will be having a wedding soon," Jacob laughed, keeping his arm around Molly. "Yes, Miguel, as soon as it can be arranged. You will stand up with me, of course." "It would be my honor," Miguel said. "Miss Molly, welcome to the family. This old ranch has needed a good woman's touch for far too long." "I am happy to provide it," Molly said, beaming. "Though I am going to need help, I do not know much about running a ranch." "You will learn," Jacob said confidently, "and you have good instincts." Together, we will make this place thrive again. Daniel returned a week later to find the ranch transformed. The house was clean and welcoming, the repairs were ongoing, and his sister was engaged to be married. He took one look at the couple standing together on the porch, at the way they looked at each other, and broke into a wide smile. "I cannot leave you alone for 3 weeks without you going and falling in love," he teased Molly, hugging her tight. "He is a good man, Daniel," Molly said seriously. "He saved your life, and in many ways he has saved mine too." "Then I am happy for you both," Daniel said, shaking Jacob's hand firmly. "Welcome to the family, Jacob, though I have to warn you, the O'Briens are a stubborn lot." "I have noticed," Jacob said dryly, glancing at Molly with affection. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in San Antonio. It was a simple ceremony, attended by Miguel, Daniel, a few people from town who remembered the old Jacob and were glad to see him happy again. Molly wore a simple dress of pale blue that brought out her eyes, and she had wildflowers woven into her red hair. When Jacob saw her walking down the aisle toward him, his breath caught. She was so beautiful, so full of life and promise. He could hardly believe that this incredible woman had chosen him, had agreed to share her life with him. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob kissed Molly with all the love and gratitude in his heart, and the small congregation applauded. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch. Miguel had prepared a feast, and neighbors who had not visited in years came to welcome the new bride and celebrate Jacob's return to life. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy. Jacob found himself in the middle of it all, his wife by his side, feeling truly happy for the first time in so long. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Daniel pulled his sister aside. "Are you sure about this, Molly? It is not too late to change your mind. You could come back to Boston with me, back to civilization." "This is my home now," Molly said firmly, looking across the yard to where Jacob was talking with Miguel. "He is my home. I have never been more sure of anything in my life." "Then I am happy for you," Daniel said, hugging her again. "You deserve this, sis. You deserve all the happiness in the world." That night, alone together for the first time as husband and wife, Jacob and Molly stood on the porch of their home, looking out at the land that stretched before them. "What are you thinking?" Molly asked, leaning against him. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man alive," Jacob said. "A few months ago I was alone, bitter, convinced my life was over, and then you appeared like a gift from God or fate or whatever force governs this world. You gave me back my life, Molly." "You gave me mine," Molly countered. "You saved my brother, you gave me a home and a purpose. You taught me that love can bloom even in the hardest soil, that hope can survive even the worst grief." "We saved each other," Jacob said, turning to face her. "And now we build a life together, a good life. I promise you that, Molly Hartley. I will work every day to make you happy, to be worthy of the gift you have given me." "You are already worthy," Molly said, reaching up to touch his face. "You just had to remember that about yourself." They went inside together, closing the door on the past and opening themselves to the future, whatever it might bring. The first year of their marriage was hard work, but filled with joy. Jacob threw himself into rebuilding the ranch with renewed vigor. They expanded the herd, repaired all the buildings, replanted the garden. Daniel, who had decided to establish himself permanently in the San Antonio area, helped secure clear title to all the disputed land, eliminating the boundary conflicts that had plagued the ranch for years. Molly proved to be a natural rancher's wife. She learned quickly, whether it was managing the household accounts, helping with the cattle, or dealing with the occasional challenges that came with frontier life. She had a way with people too, making friends in town, building relationships with neighboring ranches. Under her influence, Broken Creek Ranch became known for its hospitality again. Miguel watched it all with satisfaction, seeing his patron transformed from a ghost to a vital, engaged man. "I told you she was good for you," he said one day as they worked on repairing a fence line. "You were right," Jacob admitted. "About everything, I was dying before she came. Now I feel alive again. It is like the whole world has color again after 3 years of gray." "And what about Senora Sarah?" Miguel asked gently. "Do you still think of her?" "Every day," Jacob said honestly. "But it is different now. Before, the memories only brought pain. Now I can remember the good times, can honor what we had without letting it destroy what I have now." Molly helped me understand that loving her does not mean betraying Sarah's memory. There is room in my heart for both the past and the present. "You have grown wise, patron," Miguel said with a smile. "Love does that to a man." In the spring of 1878, Molly discovered she was pregnant. She told Jacob one evening after dinner, her hands shaking slightly with nervousness and excitement. "A baby," Jacob repeated, his face going through a series of expressions so quickly Molly could not read them all. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Molly said. "Are you happy?" "I know we have been so busy with the ranch and maybe the timing is not." Jacob cut her off by sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around, laughing with pure joy. "Happy? Molly, I am beyond happy. This is everything I wanted, everything I thought I had lost. We are going to be parents." He set her down carefully, suddenly worried. "Are you all right? Should you be working so hard? What does the doctor say?" "The doctor says I am perfectly healthy and should continue my normal activities," Molly said, amused by his sudden overprotectiveness. "Jacob, women have been having babies on the frontier for generations. I am going to be fine." But Jacob could not help worrying. He had lost so much already, the thought of anything happening to Molly or the baby terrified him. He became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy lifting, insisting she rest frequently, driving Miguel and Daniel to distraction with his hovering. "Jacob, I love you, but if you do not stop treating me like I am made of glass, I am going to hit you with a frying pan," Molly finally said in exasperation. "I am pregnant, not dying." "I know, I am sorry," Jacob said, running his hand through his hair. I cannot lose you, Molly. The thought of anything happening to you or the baby, it terrifies me." Molly took his hands in hers, her expression softening. "I know you are afraid. After what happened with Sarah, of course you are afraid. But Jacob, you cannot protect me from everything. Life is full of risks. All we can do is face them together and trust that we will be all right." "You are right," Jacob admitted. "I will try to be less hovering, but I make no promises." Molly laughed and kissed him. "I would not expect anything less." As the months passed and Molly's belly grew, the ranch continued to thrive. They had their first truly profitable year, selling cattle at good prices, building relationships with buyers from as far away as Kansas. The house was full of life and laughter, with Daniel visiting frequently, Miguel becoming like family, and neighbors stopping by regularly. Jacob found himself thinking about the future with hope rather than dread. He imagined teaching his child to ride, passing on the skills and knowledge his own father had taught him. He imagined watching Molly with their children, knowing she would be an amazing mother. He imagined growing old on this land, surrounded by family and purpose. One evening in November, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars, Molly said thoughtfully, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not come looking for Daniel, if I had just accepted that he was missing and gone back to Boston?" "I try not to think about it," Jacob said honestly, "because the thought of never knowing you, never having this life with you, is too painful to contemplate." "I think fate brought us together," Molly said softly. "I think we were meant to find each other, to heal each other." "Does that sound foolish?" "No," Jacob said, pulling her close. "It sounds perfect, because if fate did bring you to me, then I owe it everything. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Molly Hartley. You and this baby and this life we are building together." Their son was born on a cold January night in 1879, arriving in a rush during a winter storm that kept the doctor from reaching the ranch in time. Miguel rode for help, while Jacob stayed with Molly, holding her hand, helping her through the labor with a mixture of terror and awe. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and screaming his displeasure at the world, Jacob wept. He held his son with shaking hands, overwhelmed by love and gratitude. The baby had dark hair like his own and green eyes like his mother. He was perfect. What should we name him? Molly asked, exhausted but radiant. Jacob looked down at his son, then at his wife. What about Samuel? It was my father's name. Samuel Daniel, after both our fathers. Samuel Daniel Hartley, Molly said, testing the name. It is perfect. Hello, little Samuel, welcome to the world. The doctor arrived an hour later, blown in by the storm, and confirmed that both mother and baby were healthy. Jacob sent him back to town with a generous payment and his profound thanks, then settled in to watch over his new family. That night, holding his sleeping son while Molly rested, Jacob thought about how far he had come. 3 years ago, he had been a broken man, convinced his life was over, that he would never love or hope or dream again. And then Molly had arrived, this fierce, determined, red-headed woman who refused to let him give up on himself. She had saved him, truly saved him, not just from loneliness but from himself. She had shown him that it was possible to honor the past while embracing the future, to carry grief without being destroyed by it, to love again even after devastating loss. As the storm raged outside and his family slept peacefully, Jacob made a silent promise. He would spend the rest of his life being worthy of this gift, building a good life for Molly and Samuel, creating the home and family they both deserved. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. They added onto the house, building more rooms for the family they both wanted. Samuel grew from a baby into a lively toddler, full of energy and curiosity. Jacob taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, sitting him on the saddle in front of him, showing him the land that would one day be his. In 1881, they had a daughter, Emily Rose, who had her mother's red hair and her father's blue eyes. Jacob was besotted with her from the moment she was born, this tiny, fierce girl who had her mother's determination even as an infant. Daniel became a frequent visitor, his surveying business having grown successful. He watched his sister's happiness with satisfaction, knowing that coming to Texas had been the right choice for her. He himself had married a woman from San Antonio, a teacher named Margaret, and they were building their own life in town. Miguel remained a constant presence, helping to run the ranch and serving as a beloved uncle figure to the children. He was getting older, his hair now more gray than black, but he was content. He had watched his patron transform from a broken man to someone whole and happy, and it gave him deep satisfaction. One evening in the summer of 1883, Jacob and Molly sat on their porch as they so often did, watching their children play in the yard. Samuel was 5 now, teaching 3-year-old Emily how to catch fireflies. Their laughter rang out in the twilight. "You ever miss Boston?" Jacob asked Molly. "The city, the culture, the easier life." Molly looked at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. This is my home, Jacob. You and the children and this ranch, this is where I belong." "I am glad," Jacob said, taking her hand. "Because I cannot imagine any of this without you. You know that, right? Everything good in my life, it all started with you." "We saved each other," Molly reminded him, echoing words from years ago. "And we built this life together. Neither of us did it alone." "Speaking of building," Jacob said, a slight smile playing at his lips, "I have been thinking. The ranch is doing well. We have more land than we can effectively use. What would you think about selling some of it to help Daniel and Margaret build a house closer to us? And maybe hiring on another hand or two so Miguel does not have to work so hard." "I think that sounds wonderful," Molly said. Daniel and Margaret living closer would be lovely. The children should know their cousins, and Miguel does deserve to slow down and enjoy life more. "There is something else," Jacob said, his expression becoming more serious. "I have been thinking about Sarah, about her memory. And I want to do something to honor her, something permanent." Molly squeezed his hand encouragingly. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to build a school," Jacob said. "A proper schoolhouse for the area. There are more families settling nearby, more children who need education. Sarah always believed in the importance of education. I think she would like knowing that her memory was helping children learn and grow. Molly's eyes filled with tears. That is a beautiful idea, Jacob, truly beautiful, and I want to help make it happen. So they did. Over the next year, Jacob and Molly worked with their neighbors to raise funds and materials for a schoolhouse. Jacob donated the land and a significant portion of the construction costs. The building that went up was simple but sturdy, with a small plaque inside that read, Sarah Hartley Memorial School, established 1884 for the education and betterment of all children. At the dedication ceremony, Jacob stood with Molly at his side and their children playing nearby, and felt a sense of peace he had not known was possible. He had honored Sarah's memory in a meaningful way, had turned his grief into something positive and lasting. And he had done it alongside the woman who had taught him it was possible to love again, to build again, to hope again. Life continued its steady, satisfying rhythm. The ranch grew and prospered. More families settled in the area, creating a real community. The school flourished, with Margaret serving as one of the teachers. Samuel and Emily grew strong and healthy, joined eventually by 2 more children, twins born in 1885, a boy and girl they named William and Rose. Jacob found himself happier than he had ever imagined possible. He had built a good life from the ashes of his tragedy, had created a home full of love and laughter. Every day he woke up grateful for Molly, for their children, for the second chance he had been given. Miguel eventually retired from hard ranch work, though he remained on the property in a comfortable cottage Jacob and Molly built for him. He spent his days helping with the children, telling them stories, teaching them Spanish and the old vaquero ways. He lived to see Samuel take over more and more responsibility for the ranch, to see all the children grow strong and capable. Daniel and Margaret had 3 children of their own and built a house on the land Jacob had given them. The 2 families were constantly in each other's company, the children growing up as close as siblings. Daniel's surveying business continued to thrive, and he often said that the best decision he ever made was coming to Texas and bringing his sister along. On a warm evening in June of 1890, Jacob and Molly celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary. Their children were in bed, the house was quiet, and they sat together on the porch that had been the site of so many important moments in their life together. 12 years, Molly mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I drove up to this ranch, desperate to find Daniel, and sometimes it feels like I have always been here, like my life in Boston was someone else's story. I remember that day so clearly, Jacob said. I remember thinking you were the most stubborn, infuriating woman I had ever met, and I remember being terrified because you made me feel something and I had sworn never to feel anything again. What do you feel now? Molly asked, though she knew the answer. Everything, Jacob said simply. Love, joy, gratitude, hope. You taught me it was possible to feel all of those things again. You taught me that grief does not have to be the end of the story, that there can be another chapter, a better chapter. We wrote it together, Molly said, leaning her head on his shoulder. And it is a good story, is it not? A man who thought he could never love again. A woman who came looking for her brother and found so much more. A broken ranch that became a thriving home. A family built from hope and determination. It is the best story, Jacob agreed, and it is not over yet. We have years ahead of us still, years to watch our children grow to see what they become. Years to grow old together to keep building this life we have made. Promise me something, Molly said softly. Anything. Promise me you will never regret opening your heart again. Promise me you will never wish you had stayed closed off and safe. Jacob turned to face her fully, cupping her face in his hands. Molly Hartley, loving you is the best thing I ever did. Opening my heart to you, building this life with you, it is worth every risk, every fear. I regret nothing. Nothing, you hear me? I hear you, Molly said, tears running down her cheeks. I love you, Jacob. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. And I love you, Jacob said. You saved my life, Molly. You gave me back my future. And I will spend every remaining day I have thanking God or fate or whatever force brought you to my broken ranch on that hot July day." They kissed, a kiss full of love and promise and gratitude for the life they had built together. Inside the house, their children slept safely. Around them, the ranch hummed with life and prosperity. Above them, the Texas stars shone bright and eternal. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and celebrations. Samuel grew into a strong young man, passionate about ranching and determined to expand what his father had built. At 19, he married a neighbor girl named Catherine, and they built a house on the far side of the ranch property. Emily proved to have her mother's fire and independence, going away to school and returning as a teacher, taking over at the Sarah Hartley Memorial School. William showed an aptitude for business, helping to manage the ranch's finances and expanding their markets. Rose, the youngest, had her father's quiet strength and her mother's compassion, becoming known throughout the area for her kindness and her skill with healing. Jacob and Molly watched their children become adults with pride and occasional wistfulness. Where had the time gone? How had those babies become these capable, independent people? "We did well," Jacob said one evening as they watched Samuel working with his own son, Jacob's first grandchild. "Look at them, Molly. Look at what we built. Not just the ranch, but the family, the legacy." "Sarah would be proud too," Molly said gently. "You honored her memory with the school, with the way you raised the children to value education and kindness. She is part of this legacy as well." Jacob nodded, his eyes distant. "I think about her sometimes, about the life we might have had, but I do not grieve anymore, not the way I used to. The pain has faded into something softer, something I can live with, and I have you to thank for that." "You did the work yourself," Molly said. "I just gave you a reason to try." Miguel passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1895 at the age of 76. He had lived long enough to see the ranch become one of the most successful in the area, to see Jacob's children grown and starting families of their own. At his funeral, Jacob spoke about the loyalty and friendship Miguel had shown, how he had stayed during the darkest times, how he had welcomed Molly and helped bring the ranch back to life. "He was more than an employee," Jacob said, his voice thick with emotion. "He was family. He was the brother I never had, the friend who never wavered. We will honor his memory by continuing to build what he helped us create." They buried Miguel on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple stone that read, "Miguel Reyes, loyal friend, beloved uncle, his spirit lives on in this land he loved." The loss of Miguel hit Jacob hard, reminding him of his own mortality. He was 50 years old now, his hair gray at the temples, his body showing the wear of decades of hard work. But he was healthy and strong, and he still had so much life left to live. "I am not ready to slow down yet," he told Molly one night. "There is still so much I want to do, so much I want to see. I want to watch all our children settle and have families. I want to see our grandchildren grow up. I want to grow old with you, Molly." "Then we will," Molly said firmly. Her red hair was streaked with silver now, and there were lines around her eyes, but to Jacob she was as beautiful as the day he met her. "We will grow old together, watching over this empire we built. And we will tell our grandchildren stories about how it all began, about the cowboy who thought he would never love again and the red-headed woman who proved him wrong." They kept their promise. Year followed year, bringing changes and challenges but also joy and satisfaction. The ranch continued to prosper under Samuel's management, with Jacob serving as an advisor and mentor. Emily's school expanded, adding more teachers and serving children from all over the region. William's business acumen helped the family diversify their investments, ensuring financial security for generations. Rose married a doctor, and together, they provided medical care to the growing community. Daniel and Margaret remained close neighbors and dear friends until Daniel's death in 1902. Margaret continued to live on the property, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, a beloved matriarch. Jacob missed his friend and brother-in-law, but he was grateful for all the years they had shared, for the bond they had formed. On a warm summer evening in 1907, Jacob and Molly celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. It was a grand affair with all their children and grandchildren present, along with friends from throughout the region. The ranch, which had been broken and dying when Molly first arrived, now sprawled across thousands of acres and supported 3 generations of family. After the party, when everyone had finally gone home or to bed, Jacob and Molly found themselves alone on the porch as they had been so many times before. 30 years, Jacob said wonderingly. It seems impossible. Where did the time go? Into this, Molly said, gesturing at the house, the land, the life they had built. Into all of this. Every moment of these 30 years has been worth it, Jacob. Every joy, every challenge, every single day. Do you ever wish things had been different? Jacob asked. That you had married someone from Boston, someone who could have given you an easier life. Never, Molly said fiercely. You are my life, Jacob Hartley. This ranch, our children, our grandchildren, all of it. I would not change a single moment. Well, maybe I would have found you a few years earlier, before you had suffered quite so much. But from the moment I arrived at this ranch, my life has been exactly what it was meant to be. Jacob pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she still fit in his arms after all these years. I was dead before you came, he said quietly. I had given up on everything, and then you showed up with your red hair and your stubborn determination, and you forced me back to life. You would not let me give up. You saved me, Molly. We saved each other, Molly said, as she always did. That is what love does. It saves us, it heals us, it makes us better than we could ever be alone. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night, the horses in the barn, the cattle in the far pastures. Closer, they could hear the murmur of voices as their children and grandchildren prepared for bed in various houses across the property. This is what I wanted, Jacob said suddenly. All those years ago, when Sarah and I first started this ranch, this is what I dreamed of, a thriving home full of family and life. I thought that dream died with her. I never imagined I would get a second chance at it. Fate sent me to your broken ranch, Molly said softly. And together we fixed it, both the land and you. We built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. That is our legacy, Jacob, not just the ranch or the money or the land. The legacy is the love, the family, the life. I know, Jacob said, and I am grateful for every single day of it, for you, for our children, for all of it. I love you, Molly Hartley. I will love you forever. Forever, Molly echoed, kissing him softly. That is a very long time. Not long enough, Jacob said. 1,000 years with you would not be long enough. They sat together late into the night, 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had healed each other's wounds and built a life beyond their wildest dreams. The ranch that had been broken was now whole, thriving, a testament to the power of love and second chances. As the years continued to pass, Jacob and Molly aged gracefully together. They became the heart of their family, the patriarch and matriarch everyone looked to for wisdom and guidance. Jacob taught his grandsons the art of ranching, passing on skills and knowledge accumulated over a lifetime. Molly taught her granddaughters about strength and independence, showing them that women could be both capable and feminine, both fierce and loving. They were blessed to remain healthy and active well into their 70s. Jacob could still ride a horse and work alongside his sons and grandsons, though he tired more easily than he once had. Molly still managed the household with efficiency, though she now had help from daughters and daughters-in-law who had learned from her example. On a spring morning in 1915, Jacob woke before dawn as he always had. He lay still for a moment, listening to Molly's gentle breathing beside him, watching the early light creep through the curtains. He was 70 years old, and every joint ached with the decades of hard work. But he was content, deeply and completely content. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from the depths of grief to this moment of peace. He thought about Sarah, remembering her with love but without pain. She had been his first love, and he honored her memory still. But Molly had been his salvation, his second chance, his proof that life could begin again even after devastating loss. Molly stirred beside him, opening her eyes and smiling when she saw him watching her. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning, my love," Jacob replied, pulling her close. "What were you thinking about?" she asked, settling into his arms. "Everything," Jacob said. "The past, the present, how grateful I am for all of it, how grateful I am for you." "We have had a good life, have we not?" Molly said. "The best," Jacob agreed, "better than I ever deserved." "You deserve every bit of happiness we have had," Molly said firmly. "You are a good man, Jacob Hartley. You always have been." They rose and dressed, beginning another day on the ranch they had built together. Samuel came by after breakfast to discuss plans for expanding the herd. Emily brought her latest students' work to show them, proud of how well the children were learning. William talked about a new business opportunity in town. Rose stopped in with her children, filling the house with noise and laughter. As Jacob watched his family moving around his home, as he listened to the voices and laughter, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was everything he had wanted, everything he had thought was lost. And it was all because of the red-headed woman who had appeared at his broken ranch 38 years ago, refusing to accept his isolation, demanding that he help her find her brother. That evening, as had become their habit, Jacob and Molly walked together around the ranch. They moved more slowly than they once had, but they still enjoyed seeing their domain, checking on the animals, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "Do you remember the day we met?" Jacob asked as they paused by the old barn, the same barn he had been repairing when Molly first arrived. "I remember you being the rudest man I had ever encountered," Molly said with a laugh. "You tried to send me away without even listening to why I had come." "I was trying to protect myself," Jacob admitted. "I saw you and felt something even then. It terrified me. I had convinced myself that I was dead inside, that I would never feel anything again, and then you showed up and challenged everything I believed." "I am glad I was stubborn enough to insist you help me," Molly said. "Otherwise we might never have had all this. Fate brought you here," Jacob said with certainty. "I do not know if I believe in God or destiny or whatever you want to call it. But I know that you coming here when you did, needing help finding Daniel, it was not a coincidence. It was meant to be. You were meant to save me." "And you were meant to save me," Molly countered. "I needed you as much as you needed me, Jacob. We completed each other." They walked back to the house as the stars began to appear, their steps slow but steady. Inside, they could hear the sounds of their family gathered for dinner, the grandchildren playing, the adult children talking and laughing. "This is heaven," Jacob said suddenly. "Right here, right now. If I died tomorrow, I would die happy, knowing I had been given more than I ever dreamed possible." "You are not dying tomorrow," Molly said firmly. "We have many more years together, Jacob Hartley. I am not ready to let you go yet." "Then I will stay," Jacob said, smiling at her. "For as long as I can, I will stay right here with you." They went inside together, joining their family for dinner. The table was crowded with children and grandchildren, food and laughter and love. Jacob sat at the head of the table with Molly beside him and looked around at the faces of his family. 3 of his grandchildren had Molly's red hair. 2 had his blue eyes. All of them had the strength and determination that came from their blended heritage. After dinner, the younger children begged for a story. Jacob settled into his favorite chair with little ones gathered at his feet and told them about the old days, about how their grandmother had arrived at the ranch looking for her brother, about how they had searched for him and found him just in time, about how love had bloomed in the most unlikely of circumstances. The children listened with wide eyes, even though they had heard the story many times before. It was their family legend, the foundation of everything they knew. Their grandfather who had loved and lost and learned to love again. Their grandmother, who had been brave enough to travel across the country alone, to demand help from a stranger, to fall in love with a broken man and heal him with her determination and her heart. "And then what happened, Grandpa?" asked one of the younger ones, even though she knew the answer. "Then we got married," Jacob said, smiling at Molly across the room. "And we built this ranch together. We raised your parents and aunts and uncles. We created this family, this life. And it all happened because your grandmother was brave enough to take a chance and I was lucky enough to let her." "That is the best story," the little girl said with satisfaction. "It is not just a story," Molly said gently. "It is our life, and now it is your life too. You are part of this legacy, part of this family we built. Remember that. Remember that love can heal anything, that it is never too late to begin again, that family is everything." Later, after the children had been taken home or put to bed, after the house had finally quieted, Jacob and Molly prepared for bed. They moved slowly through their nightly routine, comfortable with each other in a way that came from decades of shared life. As they lay down together, Molly curled into Jacob's side as she had done for 38 years. "I am proud of what we built," she said softly. "This family, this home, this life." "So am I," Jacob said, kissing the top of her head. "I would not change a thing. Well, maybe I would have been less stubborn when we first met. I wasted precious days trying to push you away. But it made it sweeter when you finally let me in," Molly said. "Every challenge we faced, every obstacle we overcame, it made us stronger. We earned this happiness, Jacob." "We did," he agreed. "Together, everything we did together." They fell asleep holding each other. Two souls who had found their perfect match, who had built a life beyond anything either had imagined possible. The ranch that had been broken was now whole and thriving. The cowboy who had sworn never to love again had built a life overflowing with love. And the red-headed woman who had come looking for her brother had found so much more: a home, a family, a love that would last forever. Jacob and Molly Hartley lived many more years together on Broken Creek Ranch, watching their family continue to grow and thrive. They celebrated golden anniversaries and great-grandchildren. They saw the world change around them, with automobiles replacing horses, with electricity coming to the ranch, with the frontier they had known slowly becoming civilized. But through all the changes, their love remained constant. They remained each other's best friend, closest companion, greatest supporter. They had proven that it was possible to rise from the ashes of tragedy, to love again after devastating loss, to build something beautiful from broken pieces. Their story became legend in their family, passed down through generations. The tale of the cowboy who thought he would never love again and the red-headed woman who fate sent to his broken ranch. Two damaged people who healed each other and created a legacy that would last for generations. It was a story of second chances, of the healing power of love, of the courage it takes to open your heart again after it has been shattered. It was a story of the American West, of hard work and determination, of building something lasting in an untamed land. But most of all, it was a love story. A testament to the fact that true love can bloom even in the hardest soil, that hope can survive even the darkest night, that it is never too late to begin again. And when Jacob finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Molly holding his hand and his children and grandchildren gathered around, his last words were a simple truth that summed up everything. "I loved her. I loved them all. I was blessed." Molly lived another 5 years after Jacob, continuing to be the heart of the family, the keeper of stories, the reminder of where they had come from. She spent her days surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them testament to what she and Jacob had built together. When she finally joined him, she was buried beside him on the hill overlooking the ranch, next to the memorial for Sarah and Miguel. 4 graves, 4 people whose lives had intertwined to create something extraordinary. The ranch continued through the generations, growing and changing but always remaining in the family. And every generation learned the story of Jacob and Molly, of how love had healed a broken man, of how determination and courage had built a legacy, of how fate had sent exactly the right person at exactly the right time. It was a story that reminded everyone that it is never too late for love, that second chances do exist, that broken things can be made whole again. It was a story of the Wild West, yes, but more than that, it was a story of the human heart and its infinite capacity for healing and hope and love. The Broken Creek Ranch stood as testament to their love for over a century. A thriving home built on the foundation of two people who refused to give up, on themselves or on each other. And every time someone drove through the gates, past the sign that read Broken Creek Ranch, established 1874, Hartley family, they were reminded that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unlikely beginnings, and that love, when it is true and brave, can overcome anything.